Are you looking for the absolute easiest way to get to the root cause of a problem? Well, that would be the 5 whys. And today we're going to learn about how to do the 5 whys with your team effectively so you can get to the root cause of any problem that comes your way. And we're going to do it right now. The 5 whys root cause analysis tool is famous for being the easiest way to solve a problem. But it's not as easy as you might think. You might think, hey, I just got to ask why 5 times. Well, there's a little bit more to it. So let me walk you through it and help you find a way to solve your problems a little bit better. Perhaps the best way to start is by showing you a great example of what 5 whys looks like. You're going to love this video for the way it teaches you the 5 whys and for the shoulder pads.
Sometimes the difference between jumping to conclusions and finding creative solutions can be the difference between night and day. To shed some light on the subject, let's spend a quality minute with Howland Blackiston.
In Thomas Jefferson's time, patriots defended our nation's capital from the invading British. More recently, the Park Service had to defend the Jefferson Memorial from invaders of another sort. The stone in this building was crumbling. What could be causing this decay? It turns out that it was actually the frequent washings of the stone that was creating the problem. The reason they washed it so often was because there were so many bird droppings on the building. Then they asked themselves, well, why are there so many birds in the building? There's an abundant food supply. Hundreds and hundreds of little fat spiders. So then they asked themselves, why are there so many spiders? The spiders were attracted by the midges, thousands of tiny little insects. So they asked themselves, why are there so many midges? Every evening at dusk, millions of these midges emerge in a mating frenzy. Also, at the same time every evening, the National Park Service turns on the powerful spotlights that illuminate the monument. Well, the excited midges are attracted to the light. The solution? The Park Service has delayed the daily lighting of the structure to 1 hour after sunset. The midge population is down 90%, they've broken the food chain, and there are less frequent washings. So, make sure you're working with all the information and get to the true root cause of the problem. The results can be literally night and day. For Duran Institute, I'm Howland Blackiston with another Quality Minute.
Okay, so let's walk through it. They started with a problem. The building was crumbling, or at least the stone on the building was crumbling. So they asked why. And of course, well, it's because they're cleaning it too often. Now, you could just stop there and say, okay, we're not going to clean as often, or we're just going to stop cleaning the building or something like that. But that wouldn't be very elegant, would it? So they kept digging and they said, well, why do we have to wash it so often? So why number 2? Because there's a lot of bird droppings. And again, you could have stopped there, cover the Jefferson Memorial with spikes and, make it really ugly, but that's not very elegant either. So they kept digging. Why so many bird droppings? Well, there's an abundant food supply. There's lots of spiders in the building. Well, why are there so many spiders? I probably would have stopped right there and just said, okay, we're going to spray for the spiders, kill the spiders, and the birds won't come back, and that'll be fine. But again, that's extra expense, extra time and labor. So they kept digging. Why so many spiders? Well, there's all these little midges, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't even know what a midges is. I don't think we have those here in Utah. But it's a bug, and the spiders are eating the little insects, and so they're getting fat and happy. And they said, why so many midges? Well, because we're lighting the building, and that lighting of the building is attracting all the bugs to the building. So a brilliant, elegant solution came out of that, which was, well, hey, let's just delay the lighting. So 5 different times they asked why, and they kept digging deeper and deeper into the root cause of the problem. And then they were able to come up with an elegant solution. So yes, we're going to delay the lighting. That's one solution, but we're also going to do less frequent washings. And who knows, maybe they found other ways to wash the buildings with less harsh chemicals, or with less powerful water spraying on the building or something like that. So there was multiple solutions that came out of this, but what the key here is that they kept digging, going further than they normally would in asking questions so that they could find a better root cause than just, hey, let's, cover the building with a blanket and not let anybody in, or no birds in. Let's dig into another problem that's a little closer to home, at least for me. So these are my friends over at Morton Salt, and they collect salt out of the Great Salt Lake. They create pools of water, and as the water evaporates, the plentiful salt in the salt lake is left behind, which they then filter and stack and resell as salt for your water softeners, for salting the roads, and for even salt to put on your kitchen table. Now, one of the problems they were having was very simply, the machines can't handle the big clumps of salt. The bags that we're sending are supposed to be declumped, and it's difficult for our machinery because we're getting these really hard clumps of salt. Okay, let's follow this 5 whys all the way through from the beginning. First thing, what is the problem? The machines are struggling to deal with these large clumps of salt, right? Okay, so why is this problem occurring? The clumps are much larger than our machines are specified to be able to handle. They're bigger, they're harder, okay? Why is that? Well, the lumps are getting compacted from larger lumps over time. They're being built up in these giant piles, and those clumps just keep getting bigger and harder, right? Why is that? Well, the age of the salt. Some of it is as old as 5 years old. Oh man, that's really old to have that salt sitting in that pile for that long. Why is that happening? Well, because we're storing the salt in these large piles and in such a way that the older piles are harder for us to access. They just stay there and they keep getting more compacted. Why is that happening? Well, because we don't have any first in, first out system for storing our salt. Some of it is stored in the back of the yard and some of it's in the front. And the way that we load it, it's easier to get to the stuff that we most recently dropped off rather than go around and get the salt from the back. So the salt in the back piles tends to stay there for a really long time and form a really big clump. Okay, so we've done our 5 whys analysis. Is it easy now for us to find some potential solutions to this problem? Well, the team over at Morton Salt said, yes, we think we can come up with a FIFO system and reorganize the way that we deposit and pick up the salt so that we can get to it more quickly and mitigate the problem of forming these really rock hard, big pieces of salt. So how do we know when to stop asking why? I mean, there's really no magic to just 5 whys, right? The magic is really this. If you ask why 5 times, you're probably digging much deeper than you normally naturally do, right? When you see a problem, you're just like, oh, I think I know what's causing that. Boom. And you're off to, solving the problem all of a sudden. And the 5 whys really makes you stop and ponder and think, okay, let's get to a real root cause here. Let's see if the symptom that we're seeing, what's causing that? What's causing the thing before that? What's causing the thing before that? And it's pushing you further upstream in whatever your process is to where you can solve it in an elegant, easy way. The more problems you solve upstream in a process, the much easier it is to solve them and the fewer consequences you have downstream. So the 5 whys is magical in doing that, but there's no magic in the 5 whys. It could be 6 whys, could be 7 whys. Maybe you do get to a good, elegant root cause in just like 3 whys, and that's okay. So how do we know when to stop? Well, my rule of thumb is you stop when you get to something that you know you can take an action on. And it's fairly simple to take an action on. And you also can stop when you go one step further and it becomes nonsensical. Like, well, we wouldn't have that problem if we didn't have any customers. Well, of course, you can't get rid of your customers. So you're going to continue to have those. And therefore, you're going to have this problem. So maybe you went one step too far. If it feels nonsensical, my rule of thumb is just back up a step, right? Go one step back and maybe you found something there. But if you get something actionable, something you can control the outcome of, I can control this process step, I can do something about it. That's usually a good sign that you're on the right track. Now, another warning I'll give you, a lot of people get down to a root cause of just training, okay? They say, if I just, if this employee hadn't made this mistake, we'd be fine. And the reason they make this mistake is because they haven't been trained or they're not trained well enough. Now, yes, training is very important. Yes, you need to train your employees, and most of us don't do a good enough job of that, right? We really need to invest in our employees. However, when we get to solving the problem, we don't necessarily want to just default to training. We want to say, hey, how can we mistake-proof this process? Make it impossible to make that mistake. In other words, design the process better so you aren't just relying on the greatest and best well-trained employees that have been there for 20 years. What if you bring somebody new on board? How are they going to do the job and not do it in a way that makes mistakes? So let's see if we can not have training be our root cause that we get to, but something that we can control and do something about that actually changes the process. Another issue that I see when people try to do their first 5 whys is they try to solve the problem. So as they're going through the 5 whys, instead of just saying what caused that, why did that happen, they're actually saying, well, we could solve that if we just did this, and we could fix that if we just did that. Or, the only reason that happened is because that one time, this one thing. Right? They're always looking for either excuses why it happened, or they're looking for solutions right away. And that isn't the point of the 5 whys. The 5 whys is just about, okay, let's ask why and just be transparent, open, and honest about what could have caused that. And let's write it down. Let's just capture it. We don't need to solve the problem right now. And we certainly don't need to, come up with reasons or excuses why something happened and that doesn't happen that often, right? Let's just be ready to open up and say, okay, we think this might have been the cause, and run with it. Another thing that you can do is if somebody as you're doing the 5 whys, you run into a dead end, okay? You get 2 whys in and now you're just like, you're stuck. One thing you can do is you can marry the 5 whys with something like a value stream map where you're actually walking the process, or sometimes it helps the team to just get up and go to the Gemba or the place where the work is happening and watch the process happen, so you can start to get more ideas of, oh, that could have been caused by this or that or some other thing. You can also use the 6 M's. So if you haven't gone to the 6 M's module yet in the training, you can watch that and start thinking of the different sources of variation. So all of those are tools that you can kind of pair with the 5 whys so that you can get to a root cause and not get stuck on your way. So what do I mean by symptoms? You heard me say symptom before. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to use a getting sick analogy so that you understand what symptom means. Symptom is what we're feeling, the pain we're feeling in our factory, in our hospital, wherever we're working. The pain that we're feeling, that's the symptom. Just like when your kid gets sick and they have a runny nose or they're running a fever, right? That's a symptom. It's not the actual problem. And the problem that we run into is sometimes in business, we try to cover up the symptoms. I'm feeling the pain of a runny nose, so I take some, medicine for my runny nose, or I'm feeling the pain of a fever, so I take some ibuprofen to try to break the fever. Now, that's great for putting a Band-Aid over it, but it doesn't really solve the root cause, does it? So let's go to the analogy of my kid getting sick here. Let's say my son has a virus. If we do a 5 whys, my son is sick, let's do a 5 whys on that. Well, first why is because he has a virus. Okay, well, why does he have a virus? Well, because he's been touching his hands and mouth or his hands to his mouth and eyes, and they aren't clean. Okay, so why aren't his hands clean? No, he hasn't been washing them. Well, when he's at school, why isn't he washing his hands when he's at school? Well, it turns out when I asked him, it's because the school bathroom is out of soap. Well, then you can ask, well, why is the school bathroom out of soap? Well, because the soap containers are getting so much use, they don't make it through the day. So by the end of the day, there's no more soap left. Now I've gotten down to something that's actionable that I can control, that maybe will help my son not wash his hands and therefore have dirty hands, touch his mouth, touch his face, get the virus, and then get a fever. Instead of putting a Band-Aid over the fever, I'm getting down to the root cause. So that's the level of detail we want to go to. And you can see that, filling up a soap dispenser more frequently probably wasn't what you were thinking of as a solution when I was talking about my son having a fever. But in fact, that very well could be a solution to why my son is getting colds from school. So once you've gotten to a root cause, you may have multiple ideas on how to counter that root cause. We call these countermeasures. A countermeasure is just a way to maybe solve that problem that you identified in your 5 whys. And you can have multiple countermeasures. So you want to get your team together when you've done your 5 whys and say, hey, let's brainstorm. Let's come up with all the ideas that we have on how we can solve that problem. Write them all down, give everyone a chance to brainstorm. If you haven't watched the module where we talk about brainstorming and how to do that in a scientific way to give everyone a turn, the quick and dirty of it is give everybody some sticky notes like these right here and let them write all their ideas on how to improve it on a sticky note in silence before anybody can hear that idea or judge it or knock it down. And then once everybody has their ideas, you group them together and see who had all the most similar ideas and who has the best ideas. And you can judge between yourselves and say, okay, I like these few ideas. Let's go run with these and implement those as countermeasures to the problem you were trying to solve. So for my son's fever problem, some of the countermeasures we came up with were to buy larger soap dispensers, have the custodian replenish the soap after lunch, so more than once a day, or change the settings on the dispensers to distribute 50% less soap per pump. All of those are great ideas that my team came up with to help solve the problem of not having enough soap at school and running out. So very simple solutions, easily implemented, and, it may or may not solve the problem of my son getting a fever. We may need to find other things that are causing him to get a fever besides this, but it's a great step forward. Now, what if you're doing your root cause analysis using the 5 whys and there are other things that could have been causing the problem? My son's fever and dirty hands could have been caused by the fact that he's touching all the doorknobs and running his hands up and down the railings of the school all day long. That could be another root cause that we need to address to keep him from getting sick. So there can be multiple paths when you're doing a root cause analysis, and the 5 whys is no exception. So if you look on my screen, the 5 whys on poor on-time delivery. Well, there could be different paths of what caused that. And when you're doing your 5 whys, it's okay to write down multiple paths and go down those different scenarios. And when you do that, you're just going to end up with multiple root causes that you need to then brainstorm and find ideas for countermeasures or, potential solutions to solve those problems. Another question I get is, how do I know if I actually found the root cause of the problem or if, all of this was just guessing? Well, the answer is there's really no way to know if you've solved the problem, found the true root cause until you go and test it. So you have to use the scientific method to go implement some process changes, make the process more robust, more mistake proof, whatever you're going to do, and then gather some data after you've made that change to see if the process actually got better. And if it did, congratulations, you found the root cause, or at least part of the root cause. And if the process outcomes do not change, then you have more work to do. A little tip here, it's important that you measure the process after you've made changes for enough time, whether that's minutes, hours, days, or weeks, to actually detect a change in the process, right? Sometimes you make process changes and it's just like, boom, okay, we changed it, we ran it for 10 minutes and it didn't work. Well, sometimes process changes take time and there's a learning curve where your performance actually dips before it gets better. So remember that when you're making process changes too, you need to give it some time to soak in and get some more data. There is rarely just one silver bullet that solves a problem. Now, you might get lucky. There might just be one thing that was really wrong and you change that and everything gets better. However, a lot of times there really are multiple issues that are causing your problem and they're compounding and working together against you. So to get to the real root cause, you may have to find multiple root causes, make multiple changes. Again, use the 6 M's, the 6 sources of variation, to identify all the potential areas where the process could be breaking down. And then, if you find that silver bullet, great. If not, go make multiple process changes to get your results. And with that, I'm going to challenge you to go and do your first 5 whys. What I want you to do is just at the top of the page that you see on the screen, put the symptom or problem that you're seeing in your area. So think of go back to your regular work day. What's one of the problems that you run into constantly that just drives you crazy? And then once you've written down that problem statement, start asking why. And it's better to do this with a team. So get everyone together so you get everybody's responses, and then you'll get multiple paths that you go down as you're doing the 5 whys. But grab your team, pause the video, and go do your first 5 whys until you get to an actionable root cause, something you can control, something you can do something about, and hopefully something that's a simple, elegant solution that it won't take too much effort to implement and change on. Actually, you don't need to pause the video because this is the end of the video and you can move on to the next module in your training starting right now.